received his master's degree when he was 18 or 21? 21. So please welcome Koka.
Well, thank you, and first and foremost, we really appreciate you folks being here. When we walked in here, we saw 5 people, so we had to just sit on the table and talk to each other, and then we all started walking.
Go outside, get you some more.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'm actually a new kid on the block with the CDEC from the California Inland Empire DEC. So mine is going to be more basic stuff, which is coming from what I'm trying to learn from being on the deck, and then what my thoughts are personally. So I guess with the blessings of God, I'm not underserved, but I do live pretty close to underserved community, and the tribe that helped. Well, it used to be pretty underserved. Now, thanks to some of the federal programs, they're doing extremely well, and I'm actually thankful that they trusted me to head their economic development as their vice chairman of the board, because it's an elected position and you compete with the fellow tribal members. Because the experience I have with them and they have with me in the community, they did elect me, and actually, in fact, they elected me the second time last year. So pleased to be there, and pleased to be here. I wanted to open up the slide by saying, what or who is DEC? And that was a question that I had, and thanks to Fred and a few others, I got to learn what that is. And if we talk in this room, probably have different opinions about what DEC is. In fact, earlier this afternoon, there was a session about DEC engagement, and also actually the DEC presentation itself. And then the presenter, after their presentation, asked, how many of you have known something or have seen something like this, or do you know what you're doing? And surprisingly, no one in the room raised their hand. So at least I don't feel alone anymore. So, but we all have people that help us out. So I lean on Ranck quite a bit, and our fellow colleagues, Bob is here, Melissa is here, and Freddie is here, so getting some input from them. And it's basically, to me, DEC is nothing but a service for the U.S. exporting companies, and it comes from the U.S. commercial services and the local DEC together. I guess we are partners in supporting the U.S. exporters. We really look at it as all we do, and we are the CDEC, as I mentioned earlier. So I put on what is the U.S. Commercial Services. Now that you don't know, I'm sure you all do. We are a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and that assists small to medium-sized businesses in exporting their products and services. And what I've noticed with the DEC so far is they're really working with large companies that are doing pretty good exporting out there. So the way I look at it, the people that are successfully exporting, not a whole lot of help they need. Maybe they can use some help to take them to the next level, but it's the small businesses that are not yet doing, that are capable of doing it, have the resources, but they're afraid to do it. I think that those are the people that really need our hand, our assistance. In the way, what I'm thinking is, as us as DEC, I think we can do a focus-driven reach for the underserved and minority communities, businesses, perhaps work with the local Chamber of Commerce and business organizations to see who can use our help, who we can work with. Because the way we see it, there are so many people that have the talent, education, ideas, experience, and we talk to them. And I just finished my chairmanship at the Chamber of Commerce for the regional chamber, and so many businesses that we talk to, they have the capability, but they're not doing it. So what holds one back? Think about it. What would someone that has what it needs, they have all the ingredients, maybe they're lacking on one. What's that one? What's holding one back? I believe, these are my thoughts, so a lot of you have a lot more experience with the DEC and NADEC and everything else, so feel free to jump in when we're going into the Q&A session. I think lack of confidence, maybe a mentorship. I think guidance is something else. I think this is the biggest one, trusted people, organizations to work with. The tribe that I support, Soboba and Luiseno Indians, they've been talking about starting an economic development corporation as a sub-chapter, section 17 of the tribe for years. But they were always going back and forth about how they want to do it, who they want to bring into it, should it be tribal members and whatnot. And finally they did it because they felt that they can have a blend of it, both the tribal members and non-tribal, but they left it to the tribal members to decide who they want to represent them or take them or lead them into the next level. As the Economic Development Corporation, our mission is basically to make the tribe self-sufficient for the next 7 generations to come. So if we can reach out to the minority and underserved communities, you can use some type of education. We keep talking about this. Encourage and guide them to conduct successful exporting. And this is a big one, which is assist in forming connections. And I'm sure all the DECs are doing, especially the last couple of years. There were a lot of webinars and seminars that have taken place, so continue doing that. But I really like face-to-face, one-on-one, and so they can feel comfortable. And you can also tell if they're feeling comfortable or not. And then conducting trade missions, we have actually already put in a couple of them for the CDEC this year. So, and I'm big on open house business networking mixers, and I also feel that we should invite non-DEC members. Because if it's already a DEC member, you already know what you're doing and where you are. So I think getting those non-DEC members will also help us to recruit them for the future DEC membership. I think a lot of these smaller companies, especially when you talk about minorities that own these companies, they have really worked hard for where they are. They have made some success, but they're afraid think out of the box. I think if we can guide them, think out of the box, it'll be very helpful. One of the examples that I want to share is Soboba DEC Bank. About 4 years ago, when the tribe invited me to come talk to them about joining the Economic Development Board, I went and discussed with them some of my thoughts, and I did share with them that if all you're thinking of doing is a gas station and a liquor store, which you see quite a bit out there with the tribes, I said, you don't need me for that. Right? If you want to do something different, you want to diversify your business assets and revenues and whatnot, because we are a California state and it's a California tribe, and we have a compact right now to have the casino. God forbid if that changes, then what happens? Because that's their 100% sole income at that point. And I suggested a few different businesses that we are working on right now. And the first one was the bank. And as you can imagine, when I said the tribe should own a community bank, they laughed at me. The tribal council literally laughed at me and they said, Koka, are you serious? I said, absolutely. And fast forward about 3.5, 4 years, we are opening the bank on May 27th, and the final FDIC in-person interviews on June 1st. And this is the first, I believe it's the first 100% tribal-owned community bank west of Mississippi. there were a couple in the past that had, the tribe had some equity ownership in it. And unfortunately, there was one actually in California, close to us in Palm Springs area. And they had a smaller share, but they lost money because they were not a majority partner. And there were some unfortunate real estate loans that were given that put them under. So they ended up selling it. So we have actually done that. It's a big thing for a tribe to trust it, because one of the things that when I said we can do this thing, and they said, what do you need? I said, we need to conduct a feasibility study, and the budget I gave them was $1 million. You know, and they discussed it, then I had to go to shareholders, got a vote, and then we started doing it, we put it together. It takes time, and for that to happen, it's a wonderful thing. So I really think there is always an opportunity for anyone. I mean, in this great country, doesn't matter, I know Fred mentioned, I was actually born in India and I came here as a teenager. And I came here, I think, when you listen to many of the Indo-Americans, they'll tell you a lot of them came with a very nominal amount of money. I came with my first master's tuition. That's what I came with. And you just do work hard and you keep faith and do the right things. You can get places. I mean, we have taken on more things now. We're also doing an ag project, which is right now, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many incredible funding grant opportunities that are going on. So we got some grant we're working on. So that's our quick story. Thank you, and we'll take questions when my colleagues are.
Okay. Thank you, Koka. Since we've got 3 additional speakers, I'm going to step it up a little bit. Our next speaker really doesn't need any introduction. I've known Heather for many years. We started up many years ago in government on the Rural Initiative. She reminded me the other day when she sent me a picture, which I was a lot younger. But it's been an honor and pleasure working with her. Heather is the director of the U.S. Commercial Service for the Department of Commerce. North Dakota, she represents North Minnesota, but according to her, she represents all of the U.S. But having said that, I think one of the things that she's contributed tremendously is the Rural Center. And so we're really excited to hear some more, Heather, and congratulations. I think this is just one step forward, and we're really looking forward, because rural you're going to hear a lot about. You know, it's no longer the big cities. You're going to hear places such as North Minnesota, North Dakota, San Jacinto. You know, who's ever heard of that? So, Heather, welcome.
Thank you, Fred. So I was born in Brazil and grew up on a dairy farm in Pennsylvania, studied in San Diego, my master's and my undergrad here. So lived in Africa and Brazil, so a bit of a global citizen, but growing up on the farm gave me a huge appreciation for, you know, birth and death. Started working when I was 6 years old, and just a real love for rural. I like space. You know, can't put up with traffic and congestion and all that. So the Rural Export Center came out of my work as a trade specialist, working with companies and seeing that, you know, what holds people back from exporting. You know, why is the U.S. dead last in the OECD from the percentage of our economy that comes from exporting? And I mean dead last every year. Like 13% of our economy comes from exporting, and Canada is like 30 years. You know, a huge difference. And everyone you talk to wants to export more, but what was the term earlier? Accidental exporting, or, you know, transactional exporting. John, that's how a lot of American companies get into exporting. Somebody contacts you off your website or at a trade show, and we're not real confident about it. So through the Export Tech program, I started realizing that if you do research and help companies figure out where to go, they can demystify the process, and there's basically three things that keep people from exporting, any exporter: knowledge, connections, and confidence. And through research, you can get rid of all that blockade, and suddenly a company's like, we can do this, and I know where to go, and I know who's going to help me, and here's my plan. So I started just doing a lot of research projects to help companies, and over time I'm like, oh, there's a process to this. All of North Dakota is considered rural. Northwest Minnesota is very rural, so that's all I do. But then we had a director general come out years ago, and he said, why doesn't every rural American company have access to research? Because, you know, exporting is tricky for any company, but rural has the added challenge of being far away from ports, airports. This container thing is hitting rural America the worst because, you know, we have huge distances, and several freight forwarders I talked to said, oh, just go to Chicago. It's like, that's 12 hours one way from Fargo, North Dakota. It's like, that's not really cost effective. So rural companies have a lot of additional geographical barriers that make it harder to get into exporting. So we, my DEC in North Dakota just kept pestering the congressional delegation, let's make this happen, do what you needed funding to hire people to do research projects. We knew how to do the research, but it's a lot of manpower. You can only do so much with interns, college projects. So that's how this project came to be. It was the DEC. Small rural state, you could get to know your congressional people pretty easily. And eventually Senator Amy Klobuchar in Minnesota and John Hoeven in North Dakota, they wrote a bill promoting Rural Exports Act, and then Senator John Hoeven is on the Appropriations Committee. He said, I'm going to add $500,000 to the budget. Go forth and prosper. So we now have a Rural Export Center. A couple weeks ago, before a bunch of people graduated, I had 16 people, mostly a lot of students, doing research for rural companies around the nation. We've done about 100 companies, we've talked about 100 companies in 21 states so far. If you're in a state we haven't reached, we will get to you. I'm just determined we'll get to all 50 states. So I think research could be beneficial to any company, rural or urban. Maybe eventually we can have this research program for any American company. Ultimately, that would be great. Because who doesn't need research? Everybody needs research. So to me, that's been our big method to the madness of getting more people into exporting is make it easy. And make every next step easy. Because a lot of times, you know, it's like, oh, there's a trade mission to Indonesia. Why should I go on that trade mission? You need a reason to go on that trade mission, and a lot of people, you know, they might not know if Indonesia is a good market or not. So we back it up a few steps and say, okay, let's start from the beginning. Where are your best markets worldwide based on data? And then we reach out to our amazing network of colleagues around the world and we say, what do you think? Maybe there's a coup d'etat that we didn't read about. You know? We kind of want to check in early on, and then they say, yeah, it's awesome here, great opportunity, and we're like, okay, get their feedback, and the company chooses where they want to focus, and then we do a really deep dive research project, and we have recommendations, connect them back into the network, back to their, always working with their local office, and connecting into the global office. We already have 112 services that directly came out of the research. We've only been around for 2 years, and companies that are like, oh, let's go to a gold key, let's do an IPS, let's go to this trade mission. It really activates companies. So rural, urban, and we're focused on rural right now, but it's a research-centric methodology. And so far, so good.
Thank you, Heather. So far, we've talked about outreach to Native Americans. Heather just talked about resources, research, and if you did not get it so far, you know, we have plenty of time for you to talk to each of them. Our next speaker is Basil Ajuo, and he's the president and CEO for the Minnesota Africa United. I'm trying to put a little accent on there. And he's originally from Cameroon, a graduate degree from public policy advocacy from the Metropolitan State University. Welcome.
Thank you.
You want to come up here? Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Basil Ajuo. I am originally from the Central African nation of Cameroon, where I was born and raised in a small farm in a rural area by my grandmother. Came to the United States 9 years ago. I went to college, studied Spanish, I speak French. Got appointed by then Governor Dayton to serve on the Minnesota State Board of Trustees for Minnesota colleges and university systems, one of the largest systems of community colleges in the United States, fourth largest. I worked with Senator Lopisha for 3.5 years, and I was so proud for the distinguished work she did in helping to feed the world and how my partisan policy, export and import, it really continued to inspire the journey that I was born and the values that I carry with me to this great country. But when growing up in the rural area of Cameroon and having that opportunity, when we came here to the United States, we loved the United States. We love everything United States, but because we do not have access to the products and services that our companies produce back then in Africa, we then take other options, shortcuts. Let's get what's affordable. That's why China is over there. So during my time serving on the board of trustees of Minnesota State Colleges and University Systems, I was able to travel all visiting companies, rural communities, counties, talking to employers, talking to businesses, understanding their challenges, and what was it that we could really do to help promote export to Africa. And then I'm here to talk about our successes. I'm here to talk about our programs, and I will conclude my message with a few challenges. And why am I summarizing this message this way is because we want you to take Africans, every African that you see here in the United States, shake hands with him and ask him to connect with his government, to people in the community in his home country. They're always looking for products to buy, and your goods are scarce. They're not able to see that. So when COVID hit in 2020, we didn't know about Zoom, we didn't know about webinars. But we started using webinars and make it very, very comfortable to connect our businesses over there in Minnesota, and to connect with businesses in Maryland and globally, at the comfort of your house or your home or your office, wherever you are. So since 2020, we have hosted more than 16 webinars focused on different geography, focused on different sectors, and reaching more than 6,000 people. And that is how we continually recruit our own African diaspora small businesses that have become the economic engine of the state of Minnesota. And we have now been using that small businesses and connecting them with US businesses that want to do joint partnerships, that want to do trade, that want to do business back in the continent of Africa. And number two, we are doing these webinars. When you look at the charts, we don't really follow the voice, the messages. What we follow, what we see, is actually the deals that are put on the charts. People are selling things, promoting their products, and each webinar typically brings about 300 people. Transactional things happening during the webinar. And just a few days ago, one African diaspora was able to participate in a webinar. Through the webinar, he was able to connect with the US companies selling solar panels, and they got connected through webinars. And then he and his home government have purchased already many solar panels and providing electricity in their home country, and with access to electricity and internet, they can now have access to telemedicine, they can have access to education, they can have access to businesses. So the economic landscape is changing. When we shake hands with one another and when people see the product that we are actually serving. And then I'm going now to what is it, suggestions that we have to consider is women in Africa at this point in time have actually become the economic engine of Africa. They are the forefront of everything economic at this point in time. So our secret to be successful is bringing them to our board, putting them in the front line. They are involved in agriculture, they are involved in farming. Banks trust them to give them loans to buy products, so we use them. If you add women in your businesses, shake hands with them, they are the ones that are actually changing the economic dynamics of our continent at this point in time. And we also do trade missions. And I just recently came back from my first trade mission to Malawi, where I met with the current president of Malawi and many women leaders from a dozen countries across the continent, all of them talking about by how do we have access to your goods and your services. How can we make that really possible for them to connect with you guys? And one of possibility to increase access to trade in Africa is really identifying Africans who are in the government, whether in the federal government. I'm one of them. We work, even though you're in the government, you're trying to see how you could support the development of your community, serving them. Identify African immigrants who are there in the community, involve them in their projects, involve them in connecting to other, the home countries or other networks, other buyers. It's definitely going to work. But there's no success that comes without challenges. Challenges are always there. So we have our accent. When I came to the United States, I was told to study English language, and because they want me to change my accent, I said, no, I won't change my accent. That's the only thing I carry with me to this great nation. And I've never changed the accent, and people don't hear the accent, and I'm happy that they don't hear the accent, so I'm ready to always repeat something over and over. So speaking with African immigrants, we speak slowly, listen carefully, and one of the challenges is also that there's a barrier that Africans are on the sideline, US companies are on the sideline, so there's a gap over there. We need to really come closer, we need to really shake those hands. And we will be leading our next trade mission to Ghana in July, and we'll be leading one to Cameroon in St. July, and we will come back. We are leading our next trade mission to Tanzania and Kenya. We just had a webinar this morning with the two ministers from Tanzania handed over to us by the president of Tanzania to make sure that Tanzania is a very good place for doing business and the economy is good, 50 million population, buying power, and I want to just leave that up to us and let us know time, and thank you all, and may God bless you. Thank you.
As I was listening to Basil, I'm thinking starting with our first speaker from India to Hammett, our second speaker from South Dakota, and then our third speaker from Cameroon to Minnesota. Who would have thought? And I think I was looking at that title, Depth to Reach Underserved Group, and I think it's the panel that will be reaching out and providing resources to DEC, so it should be the other way around. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Kim Benson. She's the president and CEO of Zenaida Global. She has many titles. In addition to that, she is also the UAS drone administrator for the San Bernardino International Airport. And having said that, she holds a bachelor's degree from Westman College in Santa Barbara. And she holds a master's from West Coast in international business from West Coast University. And we're looking forward for her. She's traveled worldwide. I'm not going to start where she started. I'm going to let her mention that. So please welcome Ms. Kim Benson.
It's been a joy today to hear of all the different programs that the various DECs nationwide are undertaking. And especially after this morning, I was really trying to think about how do I add value to that? What types of additional programs or approaches have I seen in place that that can be useful. And what occurred to me is the program that we're developing and we've started at the San Bernardino International Airport is actually something that can possibly be used as a template, right, for different DECs as they think about how to not only develop export promotion programs, but also export education programs and how to place them in their communities. As Fred mentioned, my company is an export management company and an international business consultancy. And in addition to working with a number of US manufacturers of products, I also have, I get to work with 2 clients in the San Bernardino area. One is the San Bernardino International Airport, and the other is the Inland Valley Development Agency. For the San Bernardino International Airport, I have, for the past 3+ years, been involved in business development for them in the Middle East, promoting their private jet terminal to private jet companies in Dubai and other areas. And with the Inland Valley Development Agency, I've been working for the past 2 years, working on launching and designing and launching, I guess we should say, the UAS Center at SBD. UAS stands for Unmanned Aircraft Systems, which all of you know as drones. And that is the topic I wanted to focus on today, because I think it provides a good illustration of how to integrate export promotion and export education into economic development. Now, the UAS Center at SBD was established as an enterprise fund under the Inland Valley Development Agency, which is the region's economic development agency. San Bernardino County is an area that historically has been quite economically disadvantaged. It's located about an hour east of downtown Los Angeles, and it has an interesting history. San Bernardino International Airport was formerly Norton Air Force Base, an historic, super important Air Force base for our country. And that base was closed in the mid-1990s. And at that point, about 10,000 jobs were lost in the region. And from that point on, a lot of work has been done to build back those jobs. And indeed, the region has now done a fabulous job of building back those jobs, in fact, exceeding about 15,000 new jobs, replacing those 10,000 that were lost. The airport, for its part, is currently the fastest growing airport in the United States for air cargo. It is a hub for FedEx, for UPS, and also for Amazon Air. And Breeze Airways, which is a commercial airline, is starting operations in August, which we're very excited about. But in 2020, the Inland Valley Development Agency decided to open this UAS center, this drone center, at the airport, which is quite unusual. And the idea is to create an enterprise fund, meaning it's an entity that is a fee-for-service model, to promote drone technology, specifically US drone technology, and to provide a place for drone companies to test their products, to provide demonstrations, product demonstrations, and also a place for people to receive drone pilot training. Now, when we talk about the international or export angle on this, from the very start, we have been committed to making sure that this entity is global in nature, has a global reach, and will help to feed the workforce development that's going on in our region as we train people in drone piloting skills, and we attract US drone companies to the area to be based there as a hub. The ways that we're doing that, okay, so three things actually. We developed a strategic partnership early on with the Federation of Professional Drone, the Professional Drone Federation of Luxembourg. Now this is an association of professional drone operators in obviously based in Luxembourg, but it's a great group of basically the the market for drones in Europe. So we are providing a place where our U.S. drone clients can come and work with that association to instantly get access to what would be their customers, their customer base, or their target market throughout Europe. The second strategic alliance we've set up is also a very interesting one, but for a very different purpose, and that is with the Civil Aviation Authority of Malta. Malta is a hub for drone technology testing, and specifically for testing. And we've developed that alliance, again, with the US exporters in mind, so that US drone companies that want to export to Europe now have also not only access to their target market, but also then access to testing to meet European standards for access into Europe. So when I talk about export promotion and building that in or baking that into economic development, that's what I'm talking about, and that's where I think DECs can replicate that model in their respective regions for yet another approach to assist the underserved communities. And then thirdly, what I've discovered about the drone industry is that they really, because they're a relatively new industry, they really are in need of export compliance information and guidance. Even in addition to the Bureau of Industry and Security courses that are provided and the lawyers, of course, that are available, these companies are, the technology is developing by the day and changing by the day, as are the regulations, the ITAR regulations, etc., export compliance regulations. So they need help on an ongoing basis, and we are committed also to providing that kind of guidance and assistance as well, so that they can more easily and readily export their technology. So I'll stop there, but I just wanted to give that as an example of how to put export promotion and export education into an economic development.
Well, thank you, Kim. What a diverse panel. We're jumping from drones to Cameroon to South Dakota to India to Kenya. Okay. So I'll start out with a question here, and then I'll follow up with the questions from the audience. Basil, I have a question for you here. You talked a little bit about women in trade. What are the strategies working with women in trade?
There are women in trade here in the United States of America. There are women in trade here in America, and there are women in trade in their home countries, and there are different groups in Africa or in Europe over here who are all African women of interest. All of them looking at opportunities of actually trade in the United States of America, helping to bring U.S. products and services back to the continent of Africa. And how did they come around creating these groups? First thing that they have been able to do to create this group is when they attend a webinar, someone will just send out an email or a message and say, "My name is Basil Ajuo. I am President and Chief Executive Officer for Minnesota African United. If you want to continue with this conversation after the webinar, please send me your email or send me your number, and I will add you up to a WhatsApp group." That's a WhatsApp. It's an app that Africans use to communicate with one another. And similarly, through that chat, you see how they start recruiting people right away. And you are part of the chat, and then another webinar starts. You see women in trade in South Africa, women in trade in Los Angeles, women in trade in Washington, D.C., women in trade in Kenya and Europe. And then when you are beginning to be part of these groups, when you have your product they also want to promote, you push it in through these groups, connect with them through these groups. You see how those things pass around. It's an easy way of really marketing your product, engaging these women, and helping to also be part of the human capital and economic development for our communities over here. And I just mentioned that one of our members, our goal is really thinking about how do we create jobs, how do we really add value to our community. when one of our members, small business owner, board, was able to purchase solar panels. And the demand now of solar panels because of electricity failure, food processing, or many challenges that comes along with lack of electricity. So the demand for these solar panels have actually increased, and the more they have received money, they have hired 2 additional employees. I just learned about that today. How did this happen? It don't happen by connecting with women in trade and African immigrants using Basil.
Thank you, Basil. Questions from the audience? Yes, please. You have a question?
Well, now my hand's up by accident. I do have a quick question.
Please.
You mentioned, the different business owners in Africa and wanting to connect with U.S. exporters, and I guess my question is, what is their biggest barrier in, what do they cite as the biggest barrier? Is it a financing deal? Is it communication? What is the biggest barrier there?
I think one of the biggest barriers for them is having financial capital to really buy. But we have put in their minds to be realistic. I also want to put in the minds of the U.S. manufacturing industries and companies also to be realistic with the manufacture of their goods and services to make them adaptable and workable and accessible and affordable within the context of Africa. While many of them may not have access to money, but they are funded by the international community, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Foundation, so they have money to buy, but they don't have local money coming from the local community. So when they have this money to buy solar panels or to buy food processing plant or to buy technology, somebody else is paying for that. But the challenge is they are not able to see you. And how do they see you? So we all want you to be involved and get connected to the African diaspora within your community and across, be part of our webinars and be part of our trade missions. And you will not just be able to connect with people that only come to see them via Zoom or whatever channel of communication that you guys have had. So that's just one of the barriers. The first thing is money, but they are being funded. Second thing is that they don't have access to your product, and then we are solving the problem by bringing in people with businessmen and women with their products, where they use that opportunity to advertise their services and their products within our webinar to make this available. We look at it on 2 fronts: humanitarian fronts and from economic development from the perspective of the country.
I'm going to direct the next question to Heather. Heather, what are the exporting needs that are unique to rural companies that you may share with us?
Rural companies have a geographical challenge, so the biggest one is shipping, cost of shipping. And then, being in person, that ability to talk to an expert or run over to port, or it's just, you got to make a much bigger effort when you're in a rural area. So everything has to be a deliberate effort, so that tends to stymie proactive activity.
Yeah, actually, a follow-up question on that. So how do you define rural? Because it can be interpreted in many different ways, right? Somebody who is from New York considers, Oshkosh, Wisconsin a rural city or rural community, whereas people from Oshkosh think it's the big city compared to some other village in Wisconsin, right? So what are the parameters around that, and how do you not get in trouble taking advantage of the resources because you're not entitled to them?
Right. We have recently updated our rural definition to be pretty straightforward. It was basically, we've had a definition for about 20 years that if you were in a community of 150,000 or less, or if you were more than 50 miles from a major metro area, you could be rural. Well, there's a lot of suburbs of big cities that are 150,000 technically less. So we've had to tighten up the definition because, you know, for the rural program, it could be overrun by suburban companies. So the new definition is there's a list of the top 100 metropolitan statistical areas in the United States who export. They are ineligible as rural. If you are within 50 miles of those metro areas, you are also ineligible. So when we looked at the numbers of the 100 or so companies who had used our services in the first 2 years, it would have eliminated 9% of that. So that list is readily available on the web, like the top 100 MSAs. The numbers are based on 2020, so there's some really weird anomalies like Las Vegas, technically rural right now. Because I don't export that much, a service economy, you know. So we do have some discretion if there's weird cases like that, but there's always, any rule has some weird, you know, exception, but it's pretty clear definition by that.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump over to Kim and ask her, in your position, you have two roles here as the UAE's administrator for the airport, and also in your position as the president and CEO. What would you say some of the successes that you could share with us and some of the challenges and based on what you've done?
Well, for the handful of U.S. manufacturing plants that I have, sorry. For the handful of U.S. product manufacturing clients that I have, the pain has been very real, as we've discussed in the last 2 days, all of us here in this room. It's been really difficult, and the challenges continue with those companies, with products. In terms of successes, I think the UAS Center at SPD is on track to be extremely beneficial to the community in which it's based, and I feel really confident and happy about the success we've already had with that.
I'm going to ask the next question to Koka here. I've worked with Native Americans before. I had a good relationship. Having the background, you're from India initially. What's your challenges to success in working with Native Americans?
I think the biggest challenge is really the trust factor. Having them understand you're actually trying to help. When I first got elected, the tribal council was introducing me, and it's like Fred did, they were giving my background. And while that was going on, there were tribal members making comments saying, why is someone that's not a tribal member telling us what to do, telling us how to grow, and things like that. And I'm listening, and I can understand that. And then somebody from the way back goes, after the introduction was done, they go, so why are you here? Because the introduction was, I'm successful, I have blah, 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 and blah. So she goes, I said, excuse me, and she wanted to repeat the question. So I told him, I said, this is your house. I'm here because you invited me and you elected me. And I said, you had a great question, why am I here? I said, I'm here because you don't have the resources. You don't have a Koka today. The goal for us is to grow your tribal members, educate them so they can get to places. Right now, we're bringing educational program for them in the banking sector, from teller positions to management trainees to management positions. The goal is to make sure one of the tribal members will become the president, CEO of the bank. That's the goal. So I think the biggest challenge is for them to trust you. Once they trust you, they're really with you. In fact, on the bank, when the pandemic hit, the casino got shut down. So there was absolutely no income coming. But they had to continue paying the cap check. So their reserves dwindle down next to nothing. So they say, hey, we don't have money to open the bank. You got to pay $25 million. If they put that $25 million, they'd be wiped out. So they were talking about not doing it, and we were talking about combining the different tribes. And finally, in the end, actually, the tribal members went against the tribal council majority. The tribal council said we'll do 50% and we'll bring in partners. The tribe said, why? We want to go on by ourselves. They were prideful of what they got. So I think it'd be wonderful. I tell them all the time, they don't know what they got today. They will know in 5, 10, 20 years what they got. Thank you.
Thank you, Koka. We have a question here.
It's actually for Koka. I just want to say that I really appreciated NADEC for such a good event. Good to see how you mentioned some barriers, for DECs, being able to get to those people. I just want to commend Fred because he understands that, he lives it, he preaches it, which is why for all the late bloomers here on the closures, he's agreed to host a open night watch party for the Golden State Warriors later at
I second that.
Okay.
I second
And he's
that.
buying the first round.
Heather, I have a question for you here. What are some of the most effective strategies for rural companies that use to overcome these challenges they face in exporting? I don't know if I was clear on that. I hope that was.
Man, it's the same stuff that would probably apply to a lot of any exporter, but the connections, it's the confidence building. Once that's what I'm trying to do at this rural export center is once a company gets into exporting to their first or second or third, it's like the fourth company is easier than the third country. Fourth country is easier than the third. It just gets easier each time you do it. So we're creating the conditions for people to develop their own in-house procedures for expansion. And it's really arduous in the beginning, or like the first time you're going into a country, you're going in blind. Like, who do you trust? But we work with larger companies too that have very sophisticated and a lot of experience. And for them, it's like, we want the data, so when we go into our negotiations, nobody's telling us something to pull the wool over our eyes and say, oh, this, that, and the other that's not true. If you go in there with a ton of data and industry information, your position is so much better in a negotiation when you're negotiating with distributors and things like that. So building your confidence, there's so many ways you can do that. Coming to the DEC conference, just seeking out knowledge and trying to learn from others and that type of stuff. So we're trying to make that easier through a step-by-step process. I was a big, probably the main proponent of the initial market check service. Anybody use that? Initial market check? For $350, the overseas office will call around to 5 or so potential dealers, distributors, buyers in a country. And to me, that's a, crawl, walk, run type of deal. I think that's what exporters need is you can't just start off in a sprint. You gotta train, you practice, and it's like a sport. So that make the next step easier. It becomes real simple for exporters, and but before long they're like, oh, this isn't even that hard. Why didn't I do this 10 years ago? And then for the experienced exporter, it's that new market. Who do you trust in that new market? The new market is going to be the least level of effort. Why spin your wheels in a country where the market is dwindling? So that's kind of helping. We give people a list of 10 or so potential buyers in a country. So I had a company I used to work with many years ago. He would do an IPS every time he got a new contact from a country. I'm like, you already got somebody trying to buy from you. Why are you doing an IPS now? Well, I want to see who else is out there. Maybe they're not the best. It was an interesting strategy. So, having that broad perspective of who all is in the market really gives you a good position to enter the market with a lot more confidence.
Well, thank you very much, Heather. Basil had to leave, he had to catch an airplane. But I'd like to thank the panel, Kim, Heather, Koka, on behalf of NADEC. I promised Jonathan, as they're looking at me here, that we're going to keep it right at 60 minutes, and I believe we did it in 58 minutes. Yeah. Jonathan was looking at his watch there, so thank you very much. I think the title of it is DEC to Reach Underserved Communities. I think we all agreed that we just learned some of the best practices and resources from the panel, and they're going to hang around. And Mike Burrows is from the airport. He's going to buy everyone. So I just thought I'd add that on that since he stepped up over here at the microphone. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.